Hello greater YouTube area and the surrounding internet regions, this is Killer Cardinal DA7. I want to make a brief statement about the events of a couple weeks ago and the resulting waves it stirred up. In case you haven't heard, and there's no friggin' way you haven't, on Saturday, August 12th, Charlottesville, Virginia turned into a battleground as white nationalists, a conglomerate of neo-Nazis, Ku Klux Klan, and various other white power groups, and Antifa, a militant anti-fascist group, met head-to-head over the removal of a statue of a Confederate leader, Robert E. Lee. At about 1:45 p.m. that Saturday, a 20-year-old by the name of James Alex Fields Jr. drove into a group of people, killing 32-year-old Heather D. Hare. In addition, nearby 2 troopers died in a helicopter crash, and 19 others were alleged to have been injured, probably more. Originally, I had written a ton about this. It wouldn't have been my longest video, but what I had written to address Charlottesville and the strife our country is currently going through, it just seemed to dance around where I stood far too much. It went off the rails considerably in a good way. It was just very distracted. I'll probably reuse a lot of that material in other videos in the future, but since I still want to address the situation of white nationalists rising up in this country, I want to take a much briefer moment to do it more effectively. On the one hand, people say there's only one side to this. I don't entirely know what they mean when they say that, but if some light-skinned people feel disenfranchised enough, if they feel scared to speak because liberals squash them enough, dismissing them with some slogan like there's only one side is not going to work to ease this tension. That isn't to say plenty of other groups don't also feel invisible and not acknowledged, but since this particular group is taking center stage lately, I feel compelled to focus on them for a few minutes. That being said, let's take a moment and glance into the future. Let's try to imagine what would happen if their side were to win, if they were to get what they wanted, if white nationalists were to gain enough strength backed by mainstream conservatives, their numbers grow enough that they can move on our whole country. Now you might say, well, that's never going to happen. Let me remind you. The DA in my name stands for Devil's Advocate. You say this can happen, I say, let's just see. While you're thinking this shit is impossible, I'm over here thinking nothing is impossible. Honestly, nothing that happens in the world is much of a surprise or a shock to me anymore. People want more extreme situations, and they're sure as shit getting them. So, let's say white nationalists win. They take over the country. What's their first major move going to be? Exterminate people of color or deport them? Exterminate the LGBT community at large or lock them up? Installing a good, clean theocracy? Destroying women's rights to vote, their reproductive rights, their consent rights. The to-do list goes on and on and on. And even if you think this is the slipperiest possible slope, and Nazis and the KKK would never do such things, their doctrines about white purity are pretty clear. Their dedication to their religion is pretty clear. The way they treat women in the LGBT community is pretty clear. There's a reason they're called white supremacists, because they feel their skin color makes them better than other people, including other white people. God has granted this land to those specific people, and as David Duke, former imperial wizard of the KKK, says, they're taking it back. Whether you're a conservative defending their simple freedom to spread a sentiment of genocide, or whether you're a liberal thinking that hitting the share button on memes 20 times a day makes you a fucking revolutionary, if you're hearing my voice, take a minute and really imagine that scenario coming to fruition. Let's say we have Nazis fill our government. You really believe that people who are that dug into the idea that light-skinned people are some master race of individuals will suddenly rein themselves in and treat people fairly? There's no balance there. There's no wiggle room. If anything, their desire for purity will only get harsher and more specific to the smallest possible group of people. They have distinct goals, a particular solution in mind. You might say, they just like armbands and old-fashioned Buddhist symbols tilted to the side. They're really not bad people. Yeah, some. A small fraction. A few of them may not be deeply bad in their hearts. I can concede that. A few may have just made some bad decisions and got caught up with the wrong crowd, okay? But what that group stands for couldn't be more destructive. While I'm at it here, let me put a few other things to rest. For instance, even if you have historical knowledge of the real differences between Nazis and the KKK, and you tell me it's actually the Nazis that are the problem, the Klan doesn't support the same genocidal goals the Nazis have. The Klan has encouraged and justified enough violence of their own since their inception that they might as well support the grander scope the Nazis have at this point. They're now willing to stand side by side, hand in hand. If they're willing to be that close of allies, their goals might as well be the same. No Klansman spoke out about how James Fields made a bad choice to run over the counter protesters. The white nationalists who were just there to defend the statue, they didn't turn the Klan or the Nazis away, saying it was all about the statue in the South and not genocide or white supremacy. They're all joining together. You might also say, you're missing the point. You're making this all about the Nazis. The point was the statue being taken down. Look, I'm not against taking the statue, moving it off of public property, and putting it in a museum as opposed to just disposing of it. I'm a person in favor of compromise, and that seems to me like it would have been an adequate compromise had either side been willing to hear it. What I'm saying is, this is a baby step. I understand some people feel that statue is some line in the sand for who they are, and letting them have it isn't any big deal. I agree there are worse things people should be fighting than monuments. But now that two groups like the Nazis and KKK are working in unison, we have a much bigger problem than fucking statues. I get that they see this as a defensive maneuver, however most people in this country, regardless of background or skin color, with loud enough political voices feel they're on the defensive. The reason that I posed the hypothetical earlier about Nazis taking over the government is to see what could happen if they were on the offensive. Would they stop at just defending a statue? Would they see that victory and go back to being peaceful Nazis? The answer is no. And now that they have all the spotlight, they're not just going to give up now that the proverbial seal has been broken. Floodgates are open, people. Now, if you're on the side that I've just talked about for the past couple minutes, you're probably thinking, what about liberals? What about them? They've done some shit too. Okay, let's talk about them then. Militant liberals, Antifa, anti-fascism. I can't lie about this, I don't have a lot of love for this side. Actually, let me correct myself, I haven't had a lot of love for this side in the past. For all the time they spend fighting Republican and conservative tyranny, and as much as most mainstream liberals claim they endorse love and equality, let's be honest, if they were to completely take over instead, I'm a cisgender, heterosexual white male, or at least I look and sound it, and you know damn well that given how most hardcore liberals view straight white males, my ability to have any say, even about my own rights, will be in significant danger in their ideal world. But you know what? That's a danger I'm willing to brave. You can make the same slippery slope claim here. Militant liberals might treat me like a slave under a pro-color, pro-female, pro-LGBT regime, but I'll tell you something, there's still a far better chance that that regime, subtracting all the ultra-religious, monotheistic, monochromatic dogma, would be able to pull itself back from the edge of sanity than Nazis and the KKK ever would. I mean, shit, do you honestly think Nazis and the KKK wouldn't eventually start looking at tanned Italians like me as the next target that threatens their pure white world? I have a lot more faith that liberals would eventually realize I'm a good person who deserves fair treatment, the same as anyone else, than Nazis or the KKK who would place my worth solely on my skin color, and even that becomes questionable. Liberals might hear me out, they might see where I'm coming from, they might acknowledge my support of other people besides myself, and they might be able to level themselves out someday. Right now, militance feels good to liberals, but if that's all that existed, they'd eventually come back to center because despite losing themselves from time to time, they maintain some humanity. If I were to support white nationalists, I'd be on borrowed time until they decide being Italian just isn't pure or white enough anymore. So yeah, I don't entirely agree with this "there's only one side" sentiment. Plenty of people are making their choices where they stand. I know what sentiments I stand with. I'd much rather support a system that says it's in favor of everyone being equal or treated fairly than a system that has no illusions about being entirely unfair to a significant amount of people worldwide. If it were up to me, the hate that's formed from white nationalist beliefs would be under their control enough that they could tolerate the fact that other people exist, but clearly either their hate has grown far too strong or they let their control over slip away. And yes, I know, it's not about hate or skin color, it's about a fucking statue. Tell you what, 2 weeks ago is about defending a fucking statue. 2 weeks ago is about light-skinned people expressing free speech to say they don't feel it's right to take down a monument to a southern military leader. Fine. Is it about free speech and a statue when conservative politicians want to make gay marriage illegal, or make abortion illegal, or prevent transgender people from serving in your military to defend your freedoms, or ban people from coming to this country simply because they're from certain other countries? Is it about free speech when Donald Trump proposes to spend millions of our dollars, as opposed to Mexican dollars like he promised you, to build a southern border wall intended to keep Mexicans out, when a southern border wall would never ever keep Mexicans out, or stop terrorists from coming in, or pretty much anything but waste time and money? Is it about free speech when Trump postures back and forth with the desperate and insecure dictator of North Korea? I endorse free speech wholeheartedly. Free speech. There weren't many people freely speaking in Charlottesville. That was a battleground, and while it could have been much worse, thankfully it wasn't, calling it anything else is what's really missing the point. Yes, people should be allowed to say anything. Problem is, when people get so impatient that what they're saying isn't having the intended effect, they get anxious, and then frustrated, and then hateful, and then we have Charlottesville. If it were up to me, I wouldn't want to see anyone else hurt or killed, but apparently we've passed the point of no return on that. Fuck, we probably passed it a long time ago, and I, like many people, have turned away and done nothing. Well, my ability to do nothing is quickly slipping away. All I really feel comfortable doing right now is put together an occasional video and express how I feel, hope others see it, hear it, and maybe feel inspired. I still want to encourage compromise where I can, where there may be room for it, but in terms of this, I realize that not a whole lot of compromise or agreement is possible. If it were, there wouldn't have been any need for a rally around that statue of Robert E. Lee. There would have been an intelligent meeting between representatives, an agreement of what to do about the statue that suited both sides, and we could all move on with our lives. But no, this is where we are. And it's incredibly sad that it's not only gotten to this point, but this is only going to get severely worse in months and years to come. When compromise is impossible, there's only fighting left. Bottom line is, you want to defend free speech, be willing to speak, and be willing to listen. That's speech. Fighting is not speech, hurting others is not speech, killing others is not speech. You want speech so fucking badly? Talk, and keep talking until you and everyone else are happy. That's how speech works. This is Killer Cardinal DA7 reminding you to use your head, be nice to each other, and take the time to think. Take care of yourselves.